Week one of the NFL is here, and you are watching Picks with David. Thanks for joining me, and welcome to week number one. As usual, we will have five big games to discuss, including the Sunday night and Monday night football games. So let's get started right away as we'll go to Chicago. The Tennessee Titans are coming to town to play the Chicago Bears in week one of the NFL. And here we go. You know, the Tennessee Titans come off of a season of turmoil. They've changed their coach. Gone is Mike Vrabel, and in comes Brian Callahan, the new head coach, the former offensive coordinator of the Cincinnati Bengals. And he starts with a pretty good, well-rounded team who brought in a lot of weapons this offseason. Will Levis, last year's number one quarterback for them, comes back. You know, he had a pretty decent season. Did not begin the season as the starter. Ryan Tannehill also gone, but he had 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, provided some hope here for the future. Gone is Derrick Henry, the longtime running back and Pro Bowler. In comes Tony Pollard, and he will split time with the other running back, Tajay Spears. Now, Tennessee was 6-11 last year, and all of their big free agent acquisitions, I would say, was on the defensive side of the ball. They've completely revamped their secondary. Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, the trade for L'Jarius Sneed from Kansas City. And so when I look at this team, I would say that they are much improved. Now, they did bring in Calvin Ridley at wide receiver to pair him with DeAndre Hopkins, who they acquired last year. And so with him coming in the wide receiver room, they've got the two-headed running game here. I think Tennessee is going to be much improved. As for Chicago, Matt Eberflus begins his third season as head coach here in Chicago. They had a 7-10 record last year, and it's all about drafting Caleb Williams with the number one pick and surrounding him with weapons. They bring in Rome Odunze with their second first-round draft pick, traded for Keenan Allen from the Chargers. Of course, they have a couple of good tight ends. They bring in Gerald Everett. And the defense last year was number one in the league against the run, but the big story here is the shifting of the offensive line. Are they going to protect Caleb Williams? He makes Mahomes-esque plays, as we saw in the preseason. And so taking a look at this game, there's a lot of energy with both these teams. I think both teams are up and coming. But I'm going to take the Chicago Bears to beat the Tennessee Titans in week one. Game number 2 is the Dallas Cowboys at the Cleveland Browns. And when it comes to these two teams, both teams made the playoffs, but it were early exits last year. Dallas went 10-5, whereas Cleveland went 11-6. But Dallas, they were destroyed at home by the Green Bay Packers, and I don't think it's going to get much better from here. They lost their defensive coordinator in Dan Quinn, who's become the new head coach of the Washington Commanders. So a whole new defensive scheme. Several of the depth players have left from that defense because they couldn't afford to keep them and pay them. They did bring in a couple other players, most notably Eric Kendricks, who used to work with new defensive coordinator Mike Zimmer in Minnesota. But a lot of contract upheaval and turmoil. CeeDee Lamb has not been in camp the entire, preseason and training camp. He will be available for this game. They lost Tony Pollard. They bring in Ezekiel Elliott, who they let go for a reason. And then they didn't sign somebody to kind of split time with him, Dalvin Cook, until, like a week before the season begins. So I don't think Cook's going to be at full speed. We know Ezekiel Elliott can produce some yards, but I think the passing game will be disrupted by the fact that Lamb was not in camp. I still think Dallas will be able to put up some points with a disgruntled Dak Prescott, who's probably going to be playing without a contract. He might be hitting free agency at the end of this year because they just can't afford the $60 million type contract that he is looking for. On the other side of the ball, Kevin Stefanski enters his fifth season as the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, and he's got Deshaun Watson, who was supposedly 100% healthy after that shoulder injury last year. This team showed that with Deshaun Watson, they could win some ball games. They went on the road and beat Baltimore in Baltimore last year. Joe Flacco was a nice story at the end of the season, but they needed more from the quarterback position. And to give him an opportunity to be able to provide that, they bring in Jerry Jeudy at wide receiver. Now, they'll still be without Nick Chubb, who is still recovering from last year's ligament tears in his knee. So Jerome Ford will start at running back. He gained over 800 yards on the ground last year, so he can be serviceable. They've got a lot of weapons to provide Deshaun Watson, and they had one of the number one defenses in the NFL last year. They were number one against the pass and the number one overall defense. And so I think Chicago, Cleveland here is primed for a week one win against the Dallas Cowboys. I'm going to take the Cleveland Browns in this matchup. The Pittsburgh Steelers take on the Atlanta Falcons. A tale of two teams who both were in search of a quarterback. Atlanta has found theirs possibly in Kirk Cousins. They drafted Michael Penix here in the offseason. So two quarterbacks there, Justin Fields and Russell Wilson for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've got two quarterbacks there. Now, Russell Wilson has a calf strain. So I think Justin Fields is going to start for Pittsburgh, who's added some pieces defensively here in this offseason to make that really good defense even better. Patrick Queen comes over from the Baltimore Ravens. Now, they've added Van Jefferson as a wide receiver. They're bringing in Arthur Smith to run the offense as the offensive coordinator. Now, if Russell Wilson was starting, I'd say that would be an advantage because Arthur Smith runs the style of offense that he is used to in Seattle. And that means that they run the football heavily, play defense, and then let Russ pick up a few big plays here and there, either with his legs or down the field. I think it's the same kind of thing that Justin Fields will be good at if he ends up starting the game. But I think that all of the weapons that Atlanta has, they haven't had a quarterback to get those weapons the ball. They did not run the ball effectively last year with Bijan Robinson. Well, now that Raheem Morris is the new head coach there in Atlanta, I don't think they're going to neglect the running game. I know the defense is going to be decent. They brought in Matthew Judon at a pass rush position. They bring in Justin Simmons at safety from Denver. And so I think the defense will take care of itself. The offense will be in question until we see if Cousins can spread the ball around to all his array of weapons. They've got, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. They bring in Darnell Mooney this offseason. And so I think with Atlanta playing at home, both teams trying to figure out the quarterback position, I think Atlanta's going to be ahead of the game. I'll take the Atlanta Falcons to beat the Steelers in week one. Sunday Night Football is a rematch of the NFC wild card game between the Los Angeles Rams and the Detroit Lions. And as far as rematches go, I think this is going to be a dandy. Detroit won 24-23 by the slimmest of margins. And both these teams have Super Bowl aspirations as we go into the season. Detroit still has Jared Goff at quarterback. They got the two-headed running game of Jamar Gibbs and David Montgomery. Great wide receivers in Amon-Ra St. Brown. They've got, Jamison Williams there, the rookie sensation at tight end in Sam Laporta. It's the defensive secondary that let them down last year and a little bit of a lack of a pass rush. So they bring in Marcus Davenport and DJ Reader for the defensive line. And in the secondary, they drafted Terrion Arnold out of Alabama and traded for Carlton Davis from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think the secondary will be much more improved, and I think Detroit might be primed to make it all the way to the Super Bowl. But in week one, let's see what happens here against the Rams. The Rams come in, Matt Stafford, of course, former Lions quarterback. He's got some really good receivers in Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua, who was an emerging star last year for this team. They drafted Blake Corum, and he'll provide a two-headed monster behind Kyron Williams running the football. The Rams showed that they could run the football last year with authority, especially when they played against Baltimore during the season last year. Not a lot has changed on their lines, and so the loss of Aaron Donald could be big defensively, but they drafted two big-time defensive players early in the draft, Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, both from Florida State University, teammates in college, become teammates in the NFL. I think the Rams are going to be a high-flying offensive act, but I think that they go to Detroit and the Lions eke it out in week number one. Finally, we've got Monday Night Football between the New York Jets and the San Francisco 49ers. And I'll tell you the truth, when it comes to this game, I don't know really what to expect. I feel like it's going to be a blowout in favor of the 49ers. The Jets, of course, did not get more than 4 plays out of Aaron Rodgers last year. We don't know what he's going to look like this year because he did not play in the preseason. Now they've got Breece Hall to run the football, and they managed a 7-10 record behind an array of shuffling around quarterbacks during the season. That defense is going to be very important for the Jets till they get their offense cooking. Now they improved their offensive line to help protect Aaron Rodgers by bringing in a couple of big solid players for that line. Now they've got Mike Williams comes over to team up with Garrett Wilson at the wide receiver position, Tyler Conklin at tight end. I think the Jets can have a pretty decent offense, especially if Rodgers can stay healthy. But they're playing the NFC champion 49ers on the road, and the 49ers have an axe to grind after losing that Super Bowl to the Chiefs. They've been one of the best teams in the NFL the last several years. Brock Purdy going to be the starter for the second consecutive full season as he comes in here, showed that he can be an elite passer with all of the weapons that he has on his team. Still got Christian McCaffrey. Brandon Ayuk signed his contract. Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. So they're loaded with offensive stars. The offensive line is mostly intact. If Trent Williams signs his contract to play left tackle, and I think he has, defensively, they lost some depth, but they're mostly intact when it comes to their defense. It was one of the best ones in the NFL. And so going into this game, I'm counting on the home field advantage, the defense of the 49ers. I think the Jets defense will give the Niners some fits because Robert Saleh, the head coach of the Jets, is the former defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers. So he has seen this offense. He knows it very well from playing against it all those years in practice. Yes, there's some different players. Yes, it's been a few years and maybe some things have changed up, but I think this could be a tighter game than people are giving it credit for. I'm still going to take the San Francisco 49ers to win on Monday Night Football. So there you have it for week number 1. Another edition of Picks with David right here on YouTube and Facebook. Thanks again for joining me, and be sure to tune in next week for another set of picks. Till then, thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.